Kia ora and welcome on into the Kiwi Football Fix, the final one for this season because, yes, sadly, the Wellington Phoenix are out of the running for the A-League title. We'll talk about the Wellington Phoenix. We'll also talk about Danny Hayes' squad, the squad that will go to Qatar and defeat Costa Rica. I got it wrong last week with the Phoenix beating Western, so I'm determined to get one of these results right. We'll talk about that with the Spoon, Jacob Spoonley. Thank you so much for joining us in studio here on the final football fix of the season.
Oh, kia ora. Absolutely great to be here. Look, I am tired. I watched the game last night. Western against Melbourne Victory. Was hoping for a Phoenix team to be playing a midweek fixture, but I'm over-caffeinated, so you might get a couple of loose ones today.
I'm looking forward to that, and we also welcome in to the Football Fix, the voice of football in this country. His name is Jason Pine. Piney, great to see you, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good to be here, guys. Good to see both of you as well. Yeah, well caffeinated at my end as well. Beautiful day in New Zealand's capital. So, yeah, ready to talk a bit of football with you. Yeah,
gutted that we couldn't be in New Zealand's capital watching the Wellington Phoenix up against Melbourne City. Look, for all that was thrown the Wellington Phoenix's way in this season of 21-22, what's your pass mark or failure mark for what they achieved? Spoon, you get underway first, mate. How do you assess their season?
Well, look, I don't like talking about off-field elements when it comes to assessing on-field performance, but this year it has been absolutely undeniable that the Phoenix have overcome so many challenges that this season should be seen as an achievement. Getting to that top six, when you consider the COVID interruptions, the injury list, and the fact they've only played 2 home games over the course of the season, for me, that is a huge pass mark for Ufitale and this team.
Yeah, I think they went into the season with the stated aim, as all A-League men's and women's teams do, of making the playoffs. And it seemed fanciful at times, didn't it, given all the things that were thrown at them, like COVID, like living away from home, the injuries to key players, the fact they couldn't bring imports in at various times, the schedule that got concertinaed right near the end. If you, at the start of the season you'd said you'll make the top 6, they would have bitten your hand off for it. At times it didn't look like they would. The fact that they did was a triumph of resilience and spirit for me. So I think you've got to give them a pass mark. Yes, they were knocked out in the first round of the finals. That's obviously disappointing, but yeah, it has to be a pass for me because they made the top 6 against expectation, really.
First of all, I want to talk about the final match of the season. Piney, 1-0 to Western. We'd beaten them on 3 occasions throughout the course of the season, twice in the league, once in the cup. What happened that night? I mean, can you put it down to Jamie Young's brilliance in goal? Can you put it down to the failure of Reno Piscopo to score one of his many chances, or James McGarry's saved header? Like, what did you read into that one?
Yeah, Young was superb. That save is as good as you'll see anywhere. The end-on vision of that save, as it hits McGarry's head and his head goalwards, you can't even see Young. He's hidden behind a player, in the middle of his goal, and he somehow gets across to pour it away and makes another couple of really good saves as well. I think the Phoenix will look back and say, we had the chances to win it. That one, Ben Old's header, Reno had a couple, one hit the bar, one saved in the first half by Jamie Young. I don't remember Ollie Sale having as many chances at his end as Jamie Young did down at his. End of the day, though, Western United are the 1-0 specialists, as Jacob said a couple of times during the commentary. They came as advertised. They got an early goal, and then they made it very difficult for the Phoenix to break them down, notwithstanding the chances I've just talked about. So, yeah, look, I don't think anything went necessarily wrong. I think maybe a couple of things just didn't go quite right enough, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with Piney there. And I think there was a really good finals football match that we saw. 90 minutes, it was really intense. There were some great chances, some great moments. And just to come back to that Jamie Young save really quickly, it's on the goal line. It needed to be reviewed by VAR. That's how close it was to going over the line. And a quick note on that, I think if the Phoenix go 1-1, I think they win it in 120 minutes because the cracks are really starting to show.
Don't say that, mate. I mean, geez, I'm already disappointed as it is, Spoon, and then you give me false hope like that well after the fact.
Well, let's get back to the analysis then, Goran. So, look, to Piney's point that he made at the end there, I don't think that the Phoenix had a player that could impose themselves on the match. We've seen Piscopo do well. He really did hog a lot of the limelight and a lot of the key moments. But if you compare him to someone like Uli De Vere would take games like that by the scruff of the neck and force the Phoenix over the line. And we didn't see that. That's a really harsh thing to say, but you look at the result, it's 1-0. So that fact stands on its own. The other point that I would make is there was a real lack of collective cohesiveness from this team. They were out of sorts when it came to the simple things at times, and I think that meant that they couldn't put sustained pressure on Western United to really try and force the issue home.
What about Goran Sandoval? Because he was employed as a defensive midfield option for the back end of the season because they had to play him there. There's no Rufer, there's no Lewis. Yes, Clayton made a late return, but you know, we finally see him employed further up the field, and it's almost like he was out of practice in that match against Western United. What were your thoughts, Spoon and then Pine, on Goran Sandoval, his impact when he first arrived at the club, playing higher up the field, and then out of necessity playing deeper? He almost went invisible. I don't mean to be cruel, but we didn't see a lot of his creativity in the back end of the season.
No, that's true, and I think that in large part was the fact that he was used as one of those pieces that Tale employed to move around the field to manage the injuries. And it's a point that I've laboured at times, but it's the truth. We've had 7 or 8 players, senior players, that have missed large chunks of the season. So when you're being used in a position that you're not used to, that definitely affects the way in which you play. And then we didn't see the familiarity between him and Piscopo at times in that Western United game, and then the familiarity further forward, the combination play that you'd expect with the likes of Hooper and Ball. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about trying to leverage the pressure on Western United to sustain pressure inside and around the 18-yard box. And I think Tale was looking, he'd set up his team and he was looking for Piscopo and for Sandoval to play in those tight pockets because he knew there wouldn't be much space between the defensive lines. And at times we didn't see that. One, because Western United was so disciplined, but two, because I think Sandoval, to your point, wasn't quite sure how he was supposed to play because he didn't have that muscle memory, he didn't have that familiarity that we've talked about and that momentum going into this game because he hadn't played in that advanced position.
Bonnie, what say you?
Should never have been played in the defensive midfield role for me. Should never, ever, ever have been dropped back into that role. There were other options. I know Lewis was injured. I know Rufer was injured. Pennington was the right choice there. For me, Sam Sutton should have played in there with Pennington, with James McGarry at left back. You don't lose a heck of a lot. Goran Sandoval is not a defensive midfielder. He doesn't tackle. He doesn't track back. And his distribution from the base of midfield is nothing like Rufer's or Lewis's. It's just not his natural role. His natural role is an attacker. He's a winger. He's a creative player who plays between the lines, and that's where he should have been played. I reckon the reason we didn't see him was because he was in an unfamiliar position, and for me it was an error on Tale's part to play Goran Sandoval in a defensive midfield role when he did have other options.
That aside, Spoon, what did you make of what Ufi Tale did with what he had at his disposal this season? Pretty impressive stuff.
I think it's superb, and the whispers that we're hearing is that the jobs that were coming up over this off-season, Tale was top of the list for a lot of people. We did see John Satsamis give a contract to Mark Rudan as he went out the door, which was surprising. So that Western Sydney Wanderers job got snapped up. But we are hearing rumours that Tony Popovic is waiting in the wings should Graham Arnold not qualify the Socceroos for the World Cup. And if that happens, then I think the conversation opens back up about what happens with Ufuk Tale's future. In terms of Tale, I think that he is in the conversation for Coach of the Year, end of. That's got to be, that cannot be questioned at this point. If he wins the game against Western United and goes into that top 4, I think it's a dead heat between him and Tony Popovic for Coach of the Year. If you look at what Tony Popovic has done, it's fantastic. He's taken a team that finished bottom and almost got them to the premiers the next season. His recruitment has been fantastic. That discipline that he's installed in the team has been wonderful, and the results are there and they speak for themselves. What Ufuk Tale has done is he's done a similar job, but he's done it on about 4 or 5 times less resource. The bang for your buck that you get with Ufuk Tale stands up against anyone across the A-League. And when you're talking about coaches and this wonderful generation of coaches that we've got coming through at A-League level at the moment, including Carl Veart, Steve Corica, I think Ufuk Tale is at the pointy end of the stick.
The Wellington Phoenix had the youngest A-League squad, 24 years of age, Jason Pine, and impressive performances from a number of those youngsters throughout this season. But how does it set them up for next season? All of these incredible experiences, dealing with COVID, living in Australia long term, barely playing at home. Surely it sets them up for greater success in the next season.
Has to, doesn't it? Because if you drop those players down into what being a footballer should be, and that's living in your hometown or the town where the football club is, sleeping in your own bed, training at your training pitch. Every other week you go across to Australia, and in the alternative week a team comes to you to play at Sky Stadium or wherever the game is taken to around New Zealand. Surely that is an environment in which a player can thrive. So if they're thriving already, then surely that will uptick again. I thought it was a great season for Ben Old. He can't possibly have expected at the start of the season to have played 24 games this season. I thought he was excellent. Sam Sutton had a really, really good season. And, of course, we saw the emergence of Finn Sermon more through necessity than anything else. And this is where Ufuk Talay is very good. He says to Finn Sermon, look, I believe in you. You've come from nowhere, really. You weren't even my first choice to come across out of the academy, but here we are. So go out there and see what you can do. And now Finn Sermon's marked himself out as a player who's earned a 3-year contract and will be, a big part of this club moving forward. So yeah, to answer the question, Goran, I think, being back in, and we touch wood on this, of course, back in normal circumstances from next season onwards can only help the development of these players even further.
When we talk about recruitment, we need to figure out, first of all, who's at Ufi Talay's disposal, okay? Because I read a story the other day that the Wellington Phoenix have 14 or 15 players contracted for next season, but just because they've signed on the dotted line for next season doesn't mean they're going to be part of the plans. I think about somebody like Ollie Sale, who's performed admirably throughout this season, and I'm sure his future lies offshore, not with the Wellington Phoenix next season. So who do they need to replace? Who's not going to be there? Can you help us out? Can you crystal ball gaze for us here on The Fix?
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good point. And with Ollie Sale in particular, if he does go overseas, and we'll start at the back and move forward. Yeah. You've got Alex Paulson there. I don't think he's quite ready, so you might see a bridging goalkeeper. And I was thinking about it.
It's not Jacob Spoonley, is it? It could be Jacob Spoonley.
I've got another goalkeeper.
I mean, you're still young. He's still young, Piney.
Why is Piney laughing? Piney, that's not funny.
He could probably still do a job. Goalkeepers can go a lot longer, can't they? So yeah, maybe he gets the third goalkeeper kick.
Jamie Young's still going.
He's
so
36, mate.
I don't
Come on.
Is he 36?
Yeah.
Is it Diamante that's 39? Mate, I could still play in midfield.
I don't think you could.
But in terms of a bridging goalkeeper, I think a bit of a joker in the pack is actually Michael Veld. Michael Veld, he's gone away to the Olympics. We've seen him play against Jordan. He didn't have wonderful games there. He needs a bit of a reset. So what better than returning back to New Zealand, being in an environment that's familiar, playing in front of a Kiwi audience to then trampoline your career back overseas.
Piney's nodding.
So, yeah, exactly. So why not sign him for 2 years, allow Alex Paulson to develop in that time, and then you've got a continuation of Kiwi goalkeepers from Marinovic all the way through to Paulson via Veld.
For me, the problem is at the other end of the pitch, and I don't want to jump all the way over the top of defenders and midfielders.
You've absolutely killed my structure there, Pine. I was going to go defence through midfield to attack, but let's go the polar opposite, mate, because that's the problem area, isn't it?
Yeah, we need to score some goals.
Well, it is. I mean, when your Golden Boot winners are sharing the Golden Boot with 6 goals apiece, in the 15-year history of the Wellington Phoenix, that is the highest goal scorer in a season, by a couple of goals, actually. Previously it was 8. So when you're only getting 6 goals out of admittedly out of 3 players, there's no focal point. You look across the teams that have made it into the A-League finals and will go deep. And Melbourne City, of course, with Jamie McLaren. Melbourne Victory have had Nick D'Agostino. You look at Western United, Alexander Prijovic got his 10th goal of the season the other night. Craig Goodwin, even though he's not an out-and-out centre forward, has got double-figure goals for Adelaide. You need a player to get you a dozen goals in a season if you are going to progress and be a danger to all kinds of opposition. And the Phoenix just haven't had that this season. They hoped it would be Hooper. He was injured perhaps a little bit too often. David Ball's never really going to be that kind of player, and the likes of Piscopo and Sandoval are more creative. So a focal point for the Phoenix attack is number one priority for me, and it's likely to be an import spot that is used up on that.
Piney, I've got 3 names, and I understand each of these guys are off contract this season, and they've all got a connection with the club. So we know that Sean Gill and Ufuk Talay do go abroad. They spread the net very wide when it comes to finding talent, and they've actually done a really good job of getting established overseas players into this Phoenix team, not only getting them down here, but integrating them into the team. But of these 3 players that are off contract, who would you go for? Roy Krishna, Marco Rojas, Costa Barbarouses?
I'd take Roy every day of the week and twice on the weekends. Obviously, Costa Costa and Marco are wonderful players, but I don't think either of them has ever really been the prolific type of goal scorer that Roy Krishna was and continued to be when he played up in the Indian Super League. I know he's getting on a bit now, but let's not forget he didn't start his professional career till he was 27. So even though he's 35 now, he's actually about 28 in footballing years. Still got his pace, still got the ability to find the back of the net. And imagine the posters you could make of Roy Krishna to attract fans to Sky Stadium. I mean, the guy's just a talisman for Phoenix fans. I'm not sure whether there's any opportunity for this to happen or for the other two either. But if you're asking me to choose between those three, then it's Roy every time.
All right, we'll just shelve the Wellington Phoenix season there and hope for a lot better in season 22-23. And by that, I mean further up the table, no injuries, no COVID, and playing home and away. Fingers crossed, right? Fingers crossed. All right, this all-white squad that was announced on Tuesday by Danny Hay, it looks pretty darn strong. Jacob Spoonley, is it our strongest ever all-white squad that will take on Costa Rica?
Have you been bugging my conversations with Piney?
Yeah, of course. I've got some spyware and I just record them on my laptop at home.
Look, if you've got Sarpreet Singh and Ryan Thomas in there, I think it is. And I think there's a lot of people at home that will probably be spitting out their beer or throwing something across the room at this point because they'll be saying they haven't gone to the World Cup. You got 1982 and 2010. They went to the World Cup. Absolutely. No argument for me. The achievement with those generations is there. We're speculating about this generation. But for me, in terms of depth and in terms of that high echelon type player, Sarpreet Singh, Ryan Thomas, Chris Wood, Winston Reid, Libby Kakache.
Did you mention Joe Bell?
Joe Bell.
Yeah.
So we can go down the list of players that are playing in top tier competitions. Well, not Winston Reid, he was, but you get the point. And then you can supplement that with a really strong, what I'd say, middle class of player. So the likes of your Stefan Marinovic, your Ollie Sale, your Matt Garbutt, your Marko Stamenic, your Nando Pinica. Those are players with promise that we're looking for them to mature over the course of this next 4 years. So I think potentially we might be a cycle too soon to get this team to the World Cup and to have that expectation of them. But we're here now. We're one game away. Why not?
Best team that's ever played in a New Zealand shirt for me, and I've watched the 82 side. That was my,
That's the difference between me and Piney.
Love for football.
I didn't watch the 82 side.
Yeah, so you two weren't even around then, but I watched the 82 side, and that garnered my love for the game. 2010 was obviously a wonderful group of footballers as well, but the difference with this group of players is the way that they approach the game. For me, those two sides in 82 and 2010. Just made themselves difficult to beat. They competed physically. They defended as though their lives depended on it. They never gave up. They never stopped running, and they thought maybe we'll nick something. And more often than not, at times they did. This bunch of players doesn't feel happy just being on the same pitch as a much more highly credentialed opponent. When Ryan Thomas, Sarpreet Singh, Libby Kakache, Joe Bell, Marko Stamenic walk out onto a football pitch now, they aren't waiting to get an autograph afterwards from some of their opponents. They're saying, you know what, we can win this game. And that is an attitude shift, and a fearlessness of youth. And Jake's right, 2022 might be a cycle too soon. But imagine these players in 2026, along with the next wave, because there are more coming. We hadn't heard of Matt Garbutt 4 years ago, and now he's at a Serie A club. Imagine the next wave. I think we're at the base now, level for the All Whites. The All Whites will never be worse than they are today, and that is a good bench or a good foundation to build from. I firmly believe that we're on the verge of our very first golden generation of New Zealand men's players.
Piney, how worried were you though the other day when Chris Wood doesn't lace up his boots for Newcastle United in that match against Arsenal, and then we hear Danny Hay talk about a twinged Achilles, which doesn't fill me with hope at all, because I thought you either had a good Achilles or it just snapped completely. I didn't realise you could twinge one. How are we feeling about his possibility to line up in this all-whites squad for Costa Rica?
Well, the other little layer of confusion here was that Eddie Howe, the coach of Newcastle, said it was a different kind of injury. He didn't say it was an Achilles. He said it was something else. I don't know whether there's an injury at all. Maybe they've just come to an agreement that he doesn't play, and I hope that's the case, because if Chris Wood doesn't play in the final game of the Premier League season, then happy days. Happy days as far as the All Whites are concerned.
Amen.
If he's 100% fit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're just foxing.
Potentially. And
Well, I don't know. I mean, a tweaked Achilles, a bit of a tight groin, a little niggle on the hamstring. They're all just different ways of saying he ain't playing today, but he's actually okay.
The key thing for me is that Woodsy banged in a couple of goals when he arrived at Newcastle. He went through a bit of a dry spell. So we hope that he can rediscover the form that made him so prolific at Burnley and at the start of his Newcastle career. The key for me is that he is fit and healthy going into this game against Costa Rica, because we saw the impact that he made coming off the bench against Peru in that last half hour in Wellington 4 years ago. The Peruvians dropped off. They effectively defended him with 4. They tried to nullify him, and in doing so, there was so much space for Ryan Thomas and Costa Barbarouses to then play off Chris Wood. I think we could see Costa Rica potentially doing something similar. They're a bunch of grizzled old professionals, and they will know a threat when they see one. And to Jason Pine's point, they will see the number 9 and Wood on the back of it in black and white, and they will say, we've got to nullify him. Now, if you do that in the past, that's potentially nullified the entire All Whites team. This generation is different. This generation's strength lies in that tier underneath Chris Wood. And that's the strength that I think Danny's really got to try and amplify going into that Costa Rica game. The attitude of we're good enough, let's play with confidence. But again, where's that weakness that we could potentially exploit against Costa Rica? And I think it is in the space that Chris Wood will create, and the space that you'll give to Elijah Just, Callum McCall, Costa Barbarouses, Marco Rojas, Joey Champness, for example. The other point that I would make is, at what point does Danny change the script throughout the course of this game? They could go up 1-0 early on and try and defend and keep that, because that'll get us to a World Cup. But if it's 0-0, at 70 minutes, if you start Wood, Barbarouses and Rojas, you can bring Champness, Grieve and Just, McCowart off the bench. That is effectively a line change. And it's going to be a lot for a team to deal with, particularly one that's just gone through a season and is tied off the back end of that season, and one that is the wrong side of 30, which this Costa Rican team, by and large, are made up of.
So, Piney, who does Danny Hay go in with in this one-off fixture for a spot in the World Cup? A couple of contentious calls have to be made. I'm thinking goalkeeper, it's down to Oli Sale or Stefan Marinovic. And have we figured out who's playing right back or right fullback, depending on what formation he goes with?
I think goalkeeper's probably the only one that he has a question mark over, and he'll probably have a gut feel which of Marinovic or Sale gets it. Marinovic has done nothing wrong for him, so he's got incumbency. But Ollie's probably, he presents a very, very good case. Otherwise, I think the team's pretty easy to pick. It's a back 3 of Painaka, Reid, and Bill Tuiloma. Libby Kakachi on the left, Tim Payne on the right, Joe Bell anchoring midfield with Marko Stamanic in there as well. So what's that, 5-2? I need 3 more. Yeah, Rojas, Barbarouses and Wood, I would say. That's probably the team.
How handy is it coming up against Peru in one of these pre-match fixtures, if you like, the friendlies in the lead up to Costa Rica? Peru, we've got history with them. We played them all the way back in, when. How do they match up in terms of similarities to Costa Rica? Do they play in the same fashion?
I think the way in which the game will be played will be quite similar. So you're going to get a real Central American, South American flair to Peru, which will be quite similar to Costa Rica, which is, I think, the ideal preparation for us going into the game against Costa Rica. You're right, there's a little bit of history there. I don't know how much that's going to play out with the players, but if you need a little bit of motivation going into an international game, the fact that this side beat you to a World Cup is definitely part of it. But again, a wonderful occasion for these players. There's about 120,000 Peruvians in Spain. I think there's about 80,000 in Italy. They're playing in Barcelona, Espanyol's ground. Apparently it's close to, if not already sold out. So what better way to get up for the game, to road test yourself going into that 90 minutes in Doha, than playing Peru, a similar side, in an absolute cauldron in Barcelona?
Golden question is, can we do it? Can we make it to the World Cup? Do we have enough quality to get past Costa Rica on June 15, Jacob Spoonley?
I think we've got enough quality in the side. Yes, we're missing some of our better players, but the character of the rest of the team and the overall quality of the squad is enough to get us there. And you're going to need to see a combination of those two features on the night: character to stay in the match, quality to win it, and you're also going to need a little bit of luck, because that's what you always need to get to the World Cup.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing both of you gentlemen in studio, listen to you call the game. Jason Pine, the voice of football in Aotearoa. Jacob Spoonley, future Wellington Phoenix goalkeeper? Who knows? Watch this space. Thanks so much for joining us on the Kiwi Football Fix.
Jesus.
Look, I may have got you a new deal with David Dome. Domey, if you're watching, mate, he's available. He's available.
Yeah, I've been available for the last 10 years, mate, and the phone hasn't been ringing.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time on the final Kiwi Football Fix. We will see you very, very soon. I would suggest June 15 for that intercontinental playoff. If you've watched throughout the season, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time wherever we pop up. Football-related stuff, yeah, who knows? But thanks for your time.